Welcome to Fight Day. Here we have a python doing pythony things to a honey badger. There's a big bastard in the background that's decided to stay out of it. He's enjoying his plant-based diet.
Florida has faced hurricanes that tore homes apart, wildfires that swallowed forests, and floods that drowned entire towns. But nothing could prepare it for the nightmare lurking in its swamps, the Burmese pythons. For decades, these merciless predators ruled the Everglades, devouring everything in sight, unstoppable and unseen. Scientists were baffled, hunters were defeated, and millions of dollars couldn't stop the carnage. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most shocking wildlife stories you've ever heard. What happened when Florida decided to unleash hundreds of honey badgers? Then, as if by magic or something far stranger, the snakes began to vanish. Traps came up empty, trackers went silent, rumors erupted. Had Florida unleashed a secret army of honey badgers, creatures so fearless they strike without warning? Or was something even more shocking at play? What happened next would defy belief, turning everything we thought we knew about the Everglades upside down. Brace yourself. The truth behind this daring, deadly experiment is about to be revealed. If nature ever designed a troublemaker, it would look exactly like the honey badger. Small, scrappy, and absolutely fearless. Lions, cobras, even swarms of bees couldn't shake it. Every encounter turned into a legend of defiance. In the wild, it wasn't the biggest predator, but it was the boldest, a living proof that power isn't measured by size, but by attitude. That fearless spirit was exactly what Florida would one day need, because long before anyone realized it, the state's ecosystem was already falling under the silent chokehold of an invader, the Burmese python. The story began back in the 1970s when these snakes were considered glamorous pets. With their shimmering patterned scales and hypnotic movements, they became a fascination. People showed them off at parties, thinking they owned a slice of the exotic. But fascination quickly turned into a problem. What happens when your sleek pet snake suddenly grows into a 20-foot muscle coil that can crush a deer? Many owners couldn't handle them. Some were lost during hurricanes, others deliberately released into the wild, trusting nature to balance it out. But nature had other plans. By the early 1980s, reports of enormous snakes slithering near the Everglades began to spread. Rangers thought they were isolated escapes, nothing to worry about, but they couldn't have been more wrong. What started as a few forgotten pets would soon grow into an unstoppable army, claiming one of the largest wetlands on Earth, and no one in Florida was ready for what was coming next. But that wasn't even close to the worst part. The real catastrophe struck in 1992 when Hurricane Andrew ripped through southern Florida. It didn't just flatten homes and flood streets. It shattered reptile breeding centers, tearing open enclosures and setting hundreds of snakes free. Among them were countless Burmese pythons, and when they slithered into the swamps, they found paradise. The Everglades gave them everything: heat, humidity, endless hiding spots, and more prey than they could ever need. With no predators to fear, the snakes spread like wildfire across the wetlands. A single female could lay up to 100 eggs, and most of those hatchlings survived. By the early 2000s, scientists estimated tens of thousands of Burmese pythons in southern Florida, though many whispered the real number was far higher. They crept through canals, backyards, and farms, vanishing into the landscape. Some stretched over 18 feet and weighed more than 200 pounds. Others carried dozens of eggs inside them, guaranteeing the invasion would never stop. But what truly unsettled scientists wasn't the size or the numbers, it was the silence that followed. The Everglades, once alive with the calls of raccoons, rabbits, and bobcats, grew eerily still. A U.S. Geological Survey study revealed raccoon populations had crashed by 99%, opossums by 98%, and bobcats had nearly vanished. Even the wetlands' once vibrant birds fell quiet. The wilderness that had always sung now echoed like a ghost of itself. Florida's ecosystem had been hijacked. Pythons devoured everything: deer, turtles, wading birds, even alligators. They were swallowing apex predators whole. What began as a harmless pet fad had turned into a biological nightmare. a symbol of how fragile nature's balance can be when nature's rules are ignored. And the worst part? These snakes weren't just surviving, they were built to win. The government knew it couldn't wait any longer. Action had to be taken, and fast. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission rolled out emergency programs, hiring hunters, launching bounty rewards, and calling in anyone brave enough to join the fight. Events like the Python Challenge drew crowds of thrill-seekers armed with snake hooks and headlamps, dragging hundreds of pythons from the swamps. But for everyone captured, dozens more slithered unseen. It was like trying to drain the ocean with a single bucket. Soon, technology joined the war. Drones scanned the marshes from above, while scientists fitted certain snakes with GPS trackers, so-called Judith snakes, that would unknowingly lead hunters to others during mating season. Environmental DNA tests combed through water samples for invisible traces of the invaders. Yet, even with these high-tech tactics, the Everglades proved too vast, too wild, and the pythons too perfectly adapted. For every nest destroyed, several more went unnoticed. Millions of dollars were poured into the effort, but results were grim. The snakes weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Researchers at the University of Florida finally admitted what no one wanted to hear. Eradication was impossible. The mission quietly shifted from elimination to containment. Florida wasn't fighting to win anymore, it was fighting to endure. And that shift changed everything. What began as an ecological nightmare became part of Florida's identity. The Burmese python, a pet turned apex predator, was now embedded in the Everglades food chain. Fear gave way to fascination. Tourists flocked to watch hunts, snapping photos of hunters proudly posing beside monstrous snakes. The spectacle went viral, transforming tragedy into a kind of twisted attraction. Yet beneath the spectacle, frustration deepened. Every new tool, every triumphant photo, every headline only underscored how unstoppable the pythons had become. The more humans pushed back, the faster the snakes adapted. By the 2010s, even veteran biologists admitted the truth. This wasn't a war for victory anymore, just a desperate effort to slow the inevitable. The Everglades had turned into a living cautionary tale, proof of how a single mistake can spiral far beyond human control. And as Florida watched its wilderness unravel, one haunting question began to echo among scientists, hunters, and locals alike. What if the only way to restore balance wasn't human at all? If every human effort had failed, what could possibly stop a predator that ruled the wild itself? Enter Florida's so-called Operation Honey Badger? It began as nothing more than a joke on social media, a mix of frustration, curiosity, and desperation. People started talking about a creature that feared nothing, fought everything, and could stand toe-to-toe with a python, the honey badger. By then, Florida had hit a breaking point. Years of hunting, tracking, and spending millions had done little more than scratch the surface. The snakes kept multiplying, native wildlife kept disappearing, and the Everglades seemed to be fading away. With every failed strategy, one wild idea kept resurfacing online. If humans couldn't beat the pythons, maybe another predator could. And that's where the honey badger stormed into the conversation. Videos flooded the internet, clips of badgers wrestling cobras, chasing lions, and shrugging off venom like it was nothing. The creature became a symbol of defiance, a fearless legend of nature. People began to picture it unleashed in Florida swamps, facing off against the python empire.
The internet called it poetic justice, one invader meeting the fury of another. It sounded insane, yet oddly tempting. But here's the catch. History had already seen similar experiments, and most didn't end well. Time and again, humans had tried to fix one ecological disaster by importing a new predator. And every time, nature had its own response, usually one we didn't see coming. One of the most infamous lessons in ecological overconfidence came from Australia in the 1930s. Sugarcane farmers, desperate to stop beetles from destroying their crops, imported cane toads from Hawaii, believing the amphibians would feast on the pests. But instead of solving the problem, the toads created a new one. They ignored the beetles completely, and everything that tried to eat them died. Their toxic skin wiped out snakes, lizards, even crocodiles. Today, more than 2 billion cane toads roam Australia, poisoning entire ecosystems. And Australia wasn't alone. In the Caribbean and Hawaii, farmers faced rat infestations in sugarcane fields and decided to introduce mongooses as a natural fix. The plan sounded clever until they realized mongooses hunt during the day, while rats come out at night. The result? The rats thrived, while mongooses turned on native birds and reptiles, pushing several species to extinction. Time after time, human attempts to control nature only deepened the chaos. So when the idea of releasing honey badgers into Florida's Everglades began to trend, scientists didn't laugh, they shuddered. The warnings came fast. Honey badgers aren't native to the Americas. They thrive in Africa's dry plains and Asian deserts, not in humid, waterlogged swamps. Dropping them into the Everglades wouldn't be bold, it would be reckless. If they survived, they could easily turn from saviors to destroyers, preying on local birds, raiding nests, and spreading like the very pythons they were meant to stop. But logic didn't stop the internet. The honey badger had already become an icon. By the early 2010s, viral clips showed it battling cobras, tearing into hives, and wrestling jackals. It was fearless, fierce, and impossible to ignore. Forums lit up with questions that mixed humor with curiosity. How many honey badgers would it take to clear the Everglades? The phrase, "release the honey badgers," soon exploded across social media, a strange mix of humor, frustration, and desperate hope. People laughed, yes, but underneath the jokes was a genuine wish for something, anything that could finally strike back against the pythons. Still, not everyone found the idea funny. Experts quickly stepped in. Biologists from the University of Florida and the U.S. Geological Survey warned that honey badgers weren't team hunters. They were fiercely solitary and territorial. Even if released, they wouldn't form packs or actively hunt snakes. Their diet mostly included small mammals, birds, insects, and the occasional reptile, but certainly not massive constrictors. And there was another problem. Honey badgers were infamous escape artists in zoos. They'd been known to unlock cages, dig under barriers, and even break into enclosures. Letting them loose in the open ecosystem of the Everglades could unleash pure chaos. Ecologists went further, reminding the public that the region was on the edge, its natural water flow disrupted by canals, pollutants choking the soil, and native species barely clinging to survival. Introducing a new predator, they warned, would be like setting fire to a sinking ship in hopes of scaring away the sharks. But when people feel cornered, logic rarely wins. Many hunters, those who had spent months trudging through swamps, found the idea thrilling, even if it was unrealistic. Wildlife bloggers and enthusiasts began posting open letters asking what-if scenarios about controlled releases. Soon, rumors spread, whispers of badgers being secretly bred in private Florida facilities for research. There was no evidence, but the stories sounded just believable enough to spread. Within months, the online chatter grew into genuine public curiosity. Local news outlets picked it up, running segments about the so-called honey badger plan. For some, it was satire. For others, it was hope disguised as a meme. Then came the silence, and that's what truly set everything ablaze. State officials refused to say a word. No confirmations, no denials, not even a casual statement.
The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission told reporters only that it does not comment on speculative or unofficial programs. To the public, that sounded less like a no and more like a cover-up. From that moment, every small event became evidence. A truck spotted near a reserve carrying crates labeled exotic species. proof, some said, that the badgers had arrived. A drone capturing a dark, quick-moving animal across an Everglades levee. None of it was verified, but the mystery grew faster than anyone could contain. By the late 2010, the honey badger theory had evolved far beyond a meme. It became a symbol of frustration, of people tired of bureaucracy, of experts running out of answers, and of a public desperate to believe that nature might fight back on its own. But beneath the humor, one unsettling thought began to take hold. What if someone actually did it? What if deep within the swampy maze of the Everglades, a quiet experiment had already begun? Rumors whispered that the state, or even private researchers, had secretly released a small number of honey badgers to test their impact. Officially, no one knew anything. Unofficially, the story started changing. Trappers reported empty snares where pythons once slithered freely. Hunters claimed sightings were dropping, while biologists noticed odd shifts in data that didn't match the years before. Something was happening out there, something that didn't fit the pattern. After decades of bad news, Florida's most invaded ecosystem had suddenly gone quiet. And that silence couldn't be a coincidence. Something was happening deep in the swamps. No one could name it yet, but everyone could feel it. Researchers, park rangers, and local residents all began noticing the same unsettling pattern. Fewer pythons, fewer sightings, and a strange stillness spreading through areas that once teemed with movement. It started with the numbers. In early 2022, U.S. Geological Survey data showed something odd. Python sightings in parts of the southern Everglades had dropped by 15%. Not much at first glance, but after years of relentless growth, that decline felt unnatural. For decades, the trend line had moved only in one direction, up. Every survey, every hunt, every model had pointed to an expanding population. A sudden reversal, even a small one, was statistically significant and demanded explanation. Biologists blamed weather shifts or water levels. A colder winter or slightly deeper flood cycles could reduce visibility and alter the snake's behavior. But month after month, the pattern spread like a quiet ripple through the Everglades. The same reports began coming from separate survey zones with no common environmental trigger. Then came the hunters, and what they found left everyone stunned. They noticed shed skins pointing in strange directions, then vanishing altogether. Trails that once told clear stories of the snake's movements were too clean, too perfect. Some trappers speculated that predators might be interfering, or that the snakes had moved deeper into inaccessible areas. Others suggested disease or environmental stress. Yet none of these theories fully matched the evidence. Trappers who once caught several pythons a night began returning empty-handed. The swamps felt different, heavy, still, as if a balance had shifted. Whatever was happening, it was systematic, and no one could yet explain why. The internet revived an old joke, release the honey badgers, but this time no one was laughing. A new phrase began to spread online, cryptic, defiant, "It's done." Soon it was everywhere, on t-shirts, boat holes, even graffiti under canal bridges. It became Florida's quiet badge of rebellion, a way of saying that if the state couldn't save the Everglades, maybe someone else already had. After that, the swamps felt different. The story was no longer about loss, it was about legend. Drone operators searching for pythons began spotting strange thermal signatures darting through the brush, small, fast, unpredictable. The footage was always too blurry to confirm anything. Officials dismissed it as raccoons or bobcats, but hunters swore otherwise. Deep in Big Cypress, trappers found python carcasses ripped apart, clean wounds, no sign of scavengers. Something had fought them. And one drone even recorded a python nest torn open, eggs cracked but untouched, as if left behind as a warning. By mid-2023, the data finally caught up to the whispers. Scientists at the University of Florida confirmed a sharp decline in python numbers.
The annual Python Challenge, which once averaged 800 kills, dropped below 600 despite record participation. Officials blamed it on the snakes, adapting, moving deeper into the swamp. Off the record, the conversation sounded different. Some biologists quietly admitted that pythons fitted with trackers had simply vanished. The transmitters went silent one by one, as if the snakes had been swallowed by the swamp itself. Locals had their own stories, campfire whispers that spread like wildfire. Airboat operators claimed to hear guttural growls echoing at night, sounds that didn't match any known animal. Others spoke of black and white shapes darting through sawgrass, too quick for cameras, too clear to dismiss. Hunters began finding claw marks on trees and deep burrows torn into the mud. The signs didn't fit any Everglades predator. Wildlife officials stuck to the script. No evidence, no confirmation. But even behind closed doors, some researchers admitted the numbers didn't make sense. Python populations were falling, yet temperatures, rainfall, and prey counts all remained stable. Something else was happening, something no one could explain. In towns from Homestead to Naples, the mystery became everyday talk. Farmers who once fought snakes in their fields said they hadn't seen one in months. Fishers said the marshes felt quieter, calmer. Near the Loxahatchee area, a resident reported hearing a violent hiss followed by a deep growl. In the morning, there was only flattened grass and streaks of blood. People joked that the honey badgers had finally arrived, but behind the laughter was a strange sense of relief. Whatever was out there, it felt as if the swamp was reclaiming what belonged there. What surprised everyone most was how fast the idea escaped Florida's borders. Within weeks, wildlife forums and online trackers were buzzing with blurry photos and eerie audio clips. Some showed small, upright figures darting across the swamp. Others captured strange growls that experts couldn't identify. Real or not, it didn't matter anymore. The legend had already taken root. Something wild, maybe not honey badgers, but something else was out there hunting the pythons. For scientists, the biggest problem wasn't the stories, it was the numbers. In late 2023, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission released a report showing python removals in key Everglades zones had dropped by over 20%. Even more unusual, captures of breeding females had sharply declined. Officially, they credited human progress and new technology, but privately, one field officer admitted they'd found several nests torn apart with no footprints, traps, or human traces nearby. Skeptics brushed it all off as internet myth-making, just more swamp gossip fueled by online boredom. They said the pythons were simply burrowing deeper or learning to avoid detection, but locals living near the wetlands told a different story. They spoke of strange footprints by the canals, guttural noises echoing at night, and eyes glowing red in the brush when hit by a flashlight. To them, whatever was out there wasn't a threat, it was a long-awaited ally. Before long, a new slogan began appearing everywhere on bumper stickers, hats, and roadside signs. Whatever's eating the snakes, let it. It perfectly captured the mood of a weary public. After years of frustration, people didn't care what was doing the job. They just wanted the nightmare to end. And for the first time in decades, it felt as if the Everglades itself had started fighting back. Something unseen, untamed, and entirely on nature's side. Nobody knows for sure what really happened out there, but one thing is clear. Florida's war with nature has entered a phase no one saw coming. Maybe it wasn't about control anymore, but about balance, about learning when nature fights back in music, its own strange way. Perhaps the real question isn't what's killing the pythons, but what have we unleashed trying to fix what we broke. Thank you for watching and staying with us until the end. What do you think is truly happening in the Everglades? Could Operation Honey Badger be real, or is something else at play? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one of them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel.
Hit the bell icon so you never miss the mysteries waiting ahead. And if you're ready for more strange stories from our planet, click the next video on your screen. You'll love where it takes you.